Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Working in Hockey podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bowens, and today I'm pleased to be joined by another Nick SPINA, currently the videographer and social media coordinator for the Utica Comets in the AHL. Nick, appreciate you taking the time to chat here today. How you doing, my man?
Absolutely. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Excited to chat. Tell me a little bit about the role right off the rip here. Videographer, social media coordinator, working for an AHL team, a good AHL team too, I'll add. Lots of good players coming through the last couple of years. Talk to me about your role as a whole. How did you first get into it? What does it evolve to? What does it entail day to day, Nick?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So basically, I shoot and edit all the video content for the Utica Comets, but I also do it for Utica City FC, which is an indoor soccer club, and then there are restaurants attached to it. So it's a lot. So I'm video for all of those brands. I think it's 7 or 8 brands total. So basically, yeah, I shoot video for them, and then I do social a little bit for both soccer and hockey. But yeah, I've been shooting and editing videos for I don't know 7 or 8 years, probably as long as I can remember. I've been editing since I was in middle school. So I was like 13 or 14. So better part of now 10 years, which is crazy. But yeah, it's always kind of been something I've been attached to. It's always been a fun hobby for me that I later on learned that I could turn into a job that pays me, which is sick. So
That's the
cool.
dream.
Yeah, getting paid to watch hockey and watch sports and be a part of it is unreal.
That's awesome. No, that's the dream. That's the dream. That's why everybody's listening. But I want to get more into that current role. But you kind of led me there to a good question that I always think about with, I'll say, creator or creative roles in general. Bear with me here as I kind of fish on this one. But when we all go to school as kids, if we're good at math, we probably know pretty early. We realize pretty early. If you're good at English, good at writing, you probably realize pretty early. If you're good at basketball, you're probably going to realize in gym class you're good at basketball. At what age or what point, and you mentioned middle school there, at what age or what point did you kind of realize, hey, I'm good at this. I have a creative mindset. I can push forward on this better than other people can. When did you kind of realize that passion and skill set that you had?
It's kind of crazy. So basically, when I was in high school, to your point, I played basketball for I don't know since I was in third grade, right?
Yeah,
So for the longest time, I was small kid, point guard, wanted to play ball.
yeah,
It got to a point where I realized I couldn't play basketball, and that was from a conversation I had with my dad, where he was like, "Listen, you're looking to get into college and go somewhere. Like, what do you enjoy doing? Like, that's what we should kind of focus
yeah,
on, like where you want to go from here." And I was like, "Well, I like playing basketball and I like editing videos." And he's like, "All right, well, like, let's be real. You're not going to play basketball. So, like, how, what's this video editing thing? Like, how do you do that?" So, that was kind of when my, initial kind of shift happened because I'd been editing videos, like just pulling clips from the NHL and practicing and, post on Instagram
hmm,
and stuff like that for, years at that point. And then, that was kind of when I started to like do more research and start to figure it out that, you could do that like for a living. So, that's kind of when my focus kind of shifted to, all right, like let's figure out how I can do that or where I can go. Right. So, for me, it started with shortly after that conversation. I mean, I was nominated from my high school to go to a film program at St. John's in Queens. And that was my first ever time, like going to a film conference, if you will, using a camera, like really anything like that. I'd only ever
yeah,
used GoPros or anything, right, for filming my vacation trips and things like that. But I never actually used a camera. So that was my first kind of taste of like, working with people and presenting in front of a room and shooting something and editing something, and it was a week-long thing. And it was like the most fun I ever had. It was like we were tasked to make a short film. I met a couple buddies, a kid from California, a kid from New York, another kid from Philly, and then it was just like the four of us hanging out and making something. And so, yeah, I think after that experience, I was like, this is so fun. I mean, if it's all about just making videos with your friends and making something good and having fun, like let's kind of keep doing that.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, from there it kind of blossomed, and then I figured out that Marist was going to be the right spot for me to keep doing that. But I didn't really realize the sports aspect of it, I think, until probably my sophomore, junior year of college. Um, and then my junior, I started working with the hockey club hockey team there. And then senior, year, I made the transition to Division One sports just to start to take it more seriously. So I guess to answer your earlier question of when did I realize I could do it, I think it was around that junior senior year shift of all right, I'm making stuff, I'm confident in it, I feel like this is good. Let's see how far I can kind of push myself and keep growing, keep adapting, and making cool stuff.
Yeah, that's a very cool story and awesome to hear. A supportive dad giving
Yeah,
you the push there. Maybe it's not basketball, but we'll make video work. That's super cool.
yeah, yeah.
When you first started, you mentioned kind of highlights, edits, little clips on Instagram and YouTube, and from NHL games. What sort of content inspirations or people did you look up to? Whose content were you consuming when you were first, dabbling with editing, different content styles, etc.?
A couple different people. It's funny. I first started uh, making videos because there was this kid that I followed on Instagram whose name was Hockey AF. That was his Instagram tag. And I remember one day I DM'd him and was like, "Hey man, love your stuff. This video is awesome. Like whatever." And he responded. He was like, "Dude, thank you so much. That means the world. Like, do you make videos?" So we started talking, and I was like, "Yeah, I make some, but I don't really like post any or whatever." He's like, "You totally should. That'd be great." Like, I was a kid for a while. I've watched his videos and loved them.
Yeah.
Turns out his name is William Edlund. He's a kid from Sweden. And from there, we kind of just talked every single day about video editing and hockey and sports. And he became like a really, really good friend of mine. So he was like the initial inspiration for me to start like actually posting and promoting my work. And he's somebody I still talk to this day. Like every couple weeks, months, we'll check in and he's been super supportive of me along the way, but always somebody that he's basically the one that kickstarted the whole thing
That's cool.
for me. So I think that's a pretty cool story. Never met him before, but always FaceTimed and talked and kept in touch. But hopefully one day we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. One day when the Comets head to Sweden for an exhibition game or something,
Exactly. Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
make that happen. But no, that's a super cool story, and I could get into a whole tangent there as I do on some of these episodes about just
Yeah.
reaching out to people and being genuine and
Yeah.
expressing that interest in people's work. That will always go very very far with genuine people. But I want to talk a little bit more again about your role today here, Nick. What sort of camera specs, I guess, if we want to call it that,
Yeah.
nerd out with me a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about what you're using to film these games. Tell me about the
Sure.
softwares, the processes that you use
Yep.
to edit these. Go a little bit behind the scenes there for somebody who might
Yep.
be looking to get into this sort of role down the road.
Yeah. Absolutely. So my main camera setup now is a Sony FX6 paired with a Sony FX3. So for the longest time, the FX3 is my workhorse. It's like, I remember I made the switch from a old Lumix camera, Panasonic Lumix camera. That was like my high school camera. And then once I kind of just decided to take it a little more seriously, I was like, all right, let's make the jump. Let's do something. So I jumped to the best camera I could think of, and at the time that was the FX3. And I've been using that for the last 4 years. So I just kind of graduated and moved on to the FX6. But yeah, I mean both workhorses. They're unbelievable cameras. So yeah, those are my two main bodies that I use in game. Basically to shoot practices, jersey reveals, games, all that. And then from there, I edited everything in the Adobe suite. I've always been a Premiere guy. Some of my friends make fun of me for not making the switch to DaVinci or not using Final Cut or whatever. But I've been an Adobe guy for as long as I can remember. So not gonna shift or make a change there. Um, but yeah, those are, I guess, gear specs wise. Those are my two.
Cool.
If I had to give you a bread and butter lens for me, a lens I couldn't live without, I think it's my 70 to 200 G Master lens. I tell everybody, I recommend that one to everybody, especially in sports. Like, if you want a career in sports and you want to take this seriously, like you could live off that lens alone. Like might not get as wide as you'd like, but you're able to get that tight stuff and shoot from range and be in the stands or be down low. Like you can make it work. And for the longest time, that was the lens I shot 85 to 90% of my games with.
Very
And
cool.
it's the lens I've had since I started. And yeah, probably one I would never get rid of.
No, that's very cool, and definitely, I'm sure there's lots of people taking notes to that and looking
Yeah.
up, maybe some early Black Friday deals
Right. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
prices start dropping. But you touched on a couple different elements or components of the game there that you are shooting and editing and working on, whether it's the walk-ins, the warm-ups in game.
Yep.
I'm always blown away by the speed at which you guys have to edit
Yep.
stuff and get it live. So
Yep.
part A, tell me a little bit about that, and part B, what's the hardest thing to film in your usual game day routine there?
Ooh, the latter half. That's a good question. Basically, I guess like game day responsibilities. I think the quickest thing to edit is goals, especially with hockey. They don't score that much, so you don't really have the luxury of like, if I, it's not like basketball where
Yeah,
they
get the
score a
next
basket,
one.
you're gonna get the next one, right? Like, um, so I think like that's the thing I've had to train myself on, and I started doing in college was like I didn't really even know at the time that you could edit live for social. Like that's I kind of discovered that with one of my other buddies who came in to shoot with me at Maris. He's like, "Why don't you edit in game?" I'm like, "Why would I do that?" He's like, "Well, so you can post on social and like fans could get a glimpse of what's happening in game. Like it's all for like social coverage." I was like, "Oh, I've never done that before. Yeah, cool." So that was something I basically trained myself to do, and it's basically it's all muscle memory. It's like the rest of it, right? Like it's just like
Right.
shooting games. It's just like shooting anything or working on anything. It's all reps. So that's something I've kind of worked on to get myself quicker. And this year I started training an intern to do the same. And she had never worked in sports before, never knew how quick a turnaround needed to be. And I'd sit there next to her and be like, okay, most of all, speed doesn't really matter. You want to look for these specific things and target those things, and then eventually you'll work on doing those things faster and quicker. But we would have editing sessions where I'd sit next to her with a timer and just go, all right, go. And start to finish. Import to export, how fast is going to take you. So I'd say that's I don't know. That's basically how I train myself to do that stuff in game. I'm always trying to be more efficient, and faster, and quicker. But
Yeah.
it's a crazy process. And then I guess the latter half of your question, um, honestly, I think hockey is one of the hardest sports to shoot.
100%.
I've shot football, I've shot basketball, shot lacrosse. I don't know what it is about hockey. I think it's maybe the level of restriction, right? Like I think with
Yeah.
basketball or football, or you're able to actually get like on the sidelines or close
Right
to
up to
people
it.
or baseline or whatever, right? But you have that physical barrier, as you should, so you don't get hurt by these guys skating on knives towards you at high speeds. Um, but yeah, I think shooting a game is probably the hardest. I think I've learned that more in teaching my intern this year like how to shoot hockey. Because for me, I've been doing it for the last year and a half, 2 years now. You get used to it, right? Like your body
Yeah.
gets used to it. But for somebody that's never shot, a hockey game before, you start to get the feel of it in warm ups, but you don't really get there until guys are ripping past you really fast, and you're like, whoa, oh my god, like I gotta move this thing quicker. I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
What this workflow is like. So, yeah, I guess day to day, it's just shooting the sport. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Very well said. Very well said. No, it's the pace is outrageous. Again, I don't know how you guys edit stuff as quickly as you do to get it live. When I edit, spoiler to anybody listening, these are recorded well in advance, so I have time to edit and comb through. And I'm not even editing; I'm just trimming out wherever I mess up. But I think the other interesting thing that you touched on there is the game versus warm up. I've heard again, kind of like you said with college sports, people working for a couple different school teams, you get to see the basketball, the football, the hockey.
right,
A
yep,
lot of times when I've talked to people who have transitioned to hockey or filled in filming a game of hockey, they think warm up's cool because there's so many guys doing different tricks and stretches,
yeah,
and there's
yeah,
you have your pick of the litter of what you want to
yep,
film, but then boom, it switches to the game. It's so fast. There's one puck. Everybody's changing every 30 seconds. They
Yep.
might have been told focus on Patrick Kane for this shift, and they can't even find him half the time. The
Right.
speed
Right.
is
Yeah.
what boggles my mind there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think too, like when you get to the higher levels, you shoot games in the NHL versus the AHL. Like players always say the difference is the speed, right? But like when
Right.
you're shooting, you're like these guys are quick, man. Like, and yeah, especially in warm-ups. Warm-ups are so fun because it gives you a chance to like be creative and
Yeah.
gives the chance for the players to have fun and do their thing and flip the puck up and down and do whatever they do. But yeah, it's fast forward. It's a crazy adjustment, but worth it. So worth it.
Absolutely. We talked about kind of the shorter length clips and editing there, the speed at which you're doing it. But you've also done some longer form stuff with the comments. I know you worked heavily on the Path, a Nico Dawes documentary. Tell the people a little bit about that, what went into filming that, what it was all about, because I think that was a super cool project. And again, with the speed and short attention span of today online,
Yeah.
it's super cool to see a well-produced, longer form piece come out from a team.
Yeah. It was actually an unbelievable process. Crazy. Definitely one of the hardest projects I've ever worked on, but definitely one of the most rewarding and fun projects. Basically, start to finish, it was a 9-month process.
Wow.
We started it in December, and it was crazy because at work, my boss told me, he's like, "Hey, listen, like I feel like, since you've gotten here, we know coming in you wanted to do more documentary work. You haven't really gotten a chance to do that. Whatever kind of piece you want to make, uh, let us know. We'll brainstorm. We'll figure it out, and then like
Cool.
that's kind of like a reward piece almost for me. So I was like, okay, cool. And I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to brainstorm and figure it out, and I couldn't come up with an idea that I like really loved. I remember talking to my parents about it. I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to think about players. I'm still trying to figure everybody out. It's my first season. Like, how can I pick somebody to tell a story about, right? And
Yeah.
so my boss was the one that came up with the idea. He's like, listen, we have one of our goalies who's like rehabbing from injury. Like maybe that's a cool, um, like story to tell. Like let's see if he's into it. I'm like, great. So and at the time too, like I was heavily inspired by the Jets rehab documentary for Brees Hall. So I was like, oh, that'd be great.
Yep.
Like I'm, love this piece. Maybe I can do something similar. So yeah, basically the story with Nico was coming back from torn labrum surgery. And at that time, he was kind of towards the end of his rehab process that had happened the year before. So we kind of caught the story more towards the tail end of it.
Sure.
So I kind of had to play catch up in a lot of ways. But yeah, beginning of December, I remember it was like I think December 4th or 5th we had the idea. December 6th it was officially approved. In terms of just walking around to everybody in the facility, from the head coach to the goalie coach to Nico, to try to get approvals. Can we do this? Do you want to do this? How does that kind of work? Um, and yeah, we got the green light from everybody. And so yeah, I guess working through that process of return to play, up to his first game in Utica, which came shortly after that on the 8th, all the way up until his call up to New Jersey, the end of that month. And then he stayed in New Jersey for 3.5, 4 months, which threw a bit of a wrench in the project for me, just because I didn't have access to him for 3 months. I didn't have an interview done by that point. So a lot of it was up and down for me. I guess a mental battle too as a creative of like, this is a piece I'm looking forward to, a piece I've been building for 3-4 weeks. It was the most exciting thing. Like I remember I came back in the room after shooting his return game to Utica, and I was like, this is by far the best game I've ever shot. Like hands down, start to finish, warm ups to anthem to
Yeah.
first, second, third, right? Like I'm getting everything I need and more. And it was one of those moments that was unbelievable. And I feel like you can feel that in the edit and in those game pieces, like that stretch of time between the beginning of December to the end of December. I felt like I was hitting my mark, and felt like I was able to kind of convey that through the story. yeah, I guess long-winded way of saying it's a, project with its ups and downs. But once we were able to interview him, in March when he came back, and edit from April to August, was finally able to be released and be out, and to collaborate with the Devils on that was a massive milestone for me, as
Yeah.
somebody who wants to work in the NHL and was able to get a taste of that and shoot up in Ottawa with their group, and collaborate with everybody there on the release. It was a dream, honestly. It's nuts.
It's an awesome story, and it's an awesome piece too.
Thank you.
People always say what shows are you watching, what movies you watched lately. Maybe I'm just a hockey sicko, but I'm watching Pro Dawes documentaries. I'm
I
watching
appreciate that.
Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em for the 29th time, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I'm watching anything hockey that is out there. So I hope
yeah.
there's more kind of longer form documentary storyline pieces like this in the coming years. It feels like we're shifting back a little bit that way in sports right
hmm
now, which is awesome. Is there anything else like that in the works for you right now?
Nothing concrete. I think we've this year we've been able to dabble more into shorter form pieces with doc stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've taken on these day in the lives this year.
Yep.
We just released our fourth episode today. So I think that's been a good, scratch the itch on, once, twice a month.
Cool.
I'm with a player start to finish and working through that process and figuring out that editing, workflow too, right? Like, the doc took me 4 months to edit, 4 or 5 months to edit, but how quickly can I turn around a piece that's a third of that length,
Yeah.
and still, maintain the quality that, I want for myself and for the product. So yeah, I'm hoping to kind of do more. Very excited that, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think the Dawes documentary was um, the first piece of content that the Devils and Comets had collaborated on,
Hmm.
which felt like a pretty cool milestone for me. And like you said earlier, I think, at least to my memory, one of the only player documentaries from a team side, especially in hockey,
Yeah.
that's ever kind of been released. So I take pride in that and pride in the project, and Nico and everybody it was incredible to work with. From the Devil side all the way to our group and our staff. It was a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges, but super, super fun.
That's great. That's great. No, I think that's a great story. And again, any aspiring creatives, any hockey sickos like myself, definitely check that one out. Which segues to my next point here, Nick. They can find it on your LinkedIn. Your LinkedIn is, I will claim, is a masterpiece. We've got your
Thank you.
resume, we've got your gondola, we've got your past work, we've got your website linked. We even have the same profile picture on your LinkedIn as your other socials, as your resume, everything. I think all those things are so important. Talk to me a little bit about branding yourself, showcasing your work, how that was taught to you, if you kind of figured it out yourself, and anything else you can shed light on there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is mostly from watching other people. I guess when it comes to building my LinkedIn,
Mhm.
that was always something that I think my dad pushed on me. Like, just make sure that, you're keeping things up to date, keeping things fresh, as, you kind of start to look for jobs and prepare yourself. More of, a fatherly recommendation, but a helpful one for sure.
Yeah.
I think as time went on, just watching other people, what they do, how they post, what they post, and how they kind of present themselves online, um, was something I always admired. I think, like, for me, I'm never really somebody that's in front of the camera that often, so something I'm kind of trying to work on more and more, in terms of posting my own content. But I think uh, in the last, I'd say, 6 months to a year, I've really been trying to push, promoting my own content, and just posting things that feel right and that I like, and things like that. Other than that, I've taken some courses and learned from some people. I've had a couple mentors that I've talked to on the phone for a couple hours about, hey, how do I really brand myself as a creative? What do I
Yeah.
post? How do I make it feel like natural? It's a tough balance. I feel like, especially when you're the voice behind a brand sometimes. just figuring out like that's how your brain is wired. Your brain is wired to post like a brand would,
Yep.
right? Especially when you're, writing captions and trying to figure that out. But when it comes to like posting yourself, how do you do that while also making it seem natural, right? Like,
Yep.
I think for me, um, I had the idea where I wanted to kind of post something on my Instagram that just said like who I was, like where have I been, what kind of things I've done and what am I, kind of looking to do. Just kind of a simple like about me video
Mhm.
that I wanted to like live on my page. And when I tell you, I tried to film that video like 5, 10, 15 times. I'm sitting in this exact office, like, is it the camera angle? Is it this? Like, no, it's just I don't know how to talk to a camera, right? So, um, that kind of shifted when I was able to work with my buddy Evan on like just graphics, right? Like I have so many photos and so much content. Like let's do that instead.
Yep.
So definitely a work in process for me just to get in front of the camera and be comfortable and convey myself online. But I appreciate the kind words that you think I've done that so far because it's been it's been a battle, but yeah, figuring it out.
100%. No, it's difficult for everybody, and I always say on here that always post your stuff. Doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or in between. Put it out there because that's how people are gonna see it. If the girl you had a crush on in grade 8 unfollows you on Instagram because you put out your Nico Dawes documentary for a third
Right.
time, like who cares? It's gonna hit
Yeah,
somebody that does care and that is
absolutely.
interested in it. So I think people need to oftentimes loosen up and let go a little bit there.
Yeah.
But you gave some great insight on, just kind of standardization of branding yourself. And again, anybody should go check out Nick's LinkedIn for a good template to work off of there. Nick, that'll segue me to my final question here. As always,
Sure.
what sort of career advice would you have for somebody looking to end up in videography or social media roles such as yourself today?
I think the biggest thing is got to be that I say this all the time to people that ask me, but it's all about reps, right? Like, it was advice I received early on, from a family friend of mine. He said, you put in your 1,000 hours of anything, and you'll get better at it. So it's all about repetition and doing the same thing over and over again, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. It's all practice. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're a creative. Or whether you're somebody else, to get good at something you have to do it a lot. You got to make mistakes because that's how you learn and that's how you figure it out, right? But beyond that too, I think the biggest thing is just being a kind person, just being friendly to people, especially when you're at some of these bigger events or not, right? Like I've been to filmmaker meetups at in an old studio I used to work at Poughkeepsie. You got to be nice to people. You got to introduce yourself. Even if you're not the most social person, I think like making those connections and establishing yourself that way in person and also online, I think makes a difference too, right? When you're networking, you're trying to get a job. I think having that presence online is definitely helpful, but talking to people, reaching out, getting to know them without asking for anything really, um, is probably my biggest advice. Just get to know people, be genuine, and have fun. I think I'm guilty of being grip my stick a little too tight. I always say,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's all about just having fun, being loose, and doing your thing. And I think the rest will work itself out.
I couldn't agree more. Great advice, great insight, great LinkedIn profile, and a great creative. Nick, can't thank you enough for your time here today, man. Tell the people where they can find you online.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my Instagram is Nick Spina 9. My website is Nick Spina Creative. And I think I'm Nick Spina 22 on Twitter. So a couple different numbers, couple different things, but same guy, same brand.
Perfect, perfect. Well, guys, thanks again for listening to this episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. On behalf of Nick and Nick, we'll see you next time.